Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. The city of Houston is still coping with massive flooding at this hour in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. It's awful. Waters are finally receding a bit, though. More than 20 have been confirmed killed so far. Today, rescue missions throughout the state saved many people from flooded neighborhoods. A nursing home was also finally evacuated from floodwaters. We'll bring you updates throughout the hour. Meanwhile, America is waking up to the menace of Antifa, the left-wing agitators who fight against oppression by violently oppressing those who oppose them. This past weekend, they got violent in Berkeley, California, and assaulted a whole bunch of people. After that, House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi had no choice but to admit they are out of control and issued a statement sort of condemning them. One of the people attacked by this group in Berkeley this past weekend was a Trump supporter called Keith Campbell. Watch this. Keith Campbell joins us tonight. Keith, you look like you were about to get really, really hurt, maybe killed. What was the predicate to that? What happened right before the tape we just played?
Well, I had gone to the park to see what was going on. I know there was a canceled Say No to Marxism show up. So I wanted to go and observe what was going on, record what was going on. I think most people figured that Antifa would be there. And it was no surprise when they showed up. Earlier in the day, there was no problem. People were giving interviews. There was a heavy police presence both around the barricaded park and throughout the park, and there was no issue. But strangely enough, we weren't allowed to have any protective gear, helmets or anything. They let about 200 Antifa with masks just come right through one of the openings and start mixing with Trump supporters. And they immediately started ejecting Trump supporters. They would find someone and surround them and usher them out. But at that point, they weren't really attacking people because the police were there. But I couldn't believe that the police were actually letting them there.
I mean, how did the beating? Well, first of all, are you injured? I mean, I can't believe you got out of there. What are your injuries like?
Yeah, you know, I'm bruised ribs, bruised kidney. It wasn't torn. They did sonogram thing just to make sure it wasn't torn. I got about 4 or 5 lumps on the back of my head, scrapes, bruises, swelling, things like that. Nothing that won't heal.
Did these guys start hitting you without warning? How did the beating begin?
Well, you know, after the massive part of the black bloc came, the police disappeared, and then there was an announcement. The police have stood down, and then like a sea of black just like poured into the park, and then it started getting violent. So after a few minutes, I'm still filming, I'm still around them, and I noticed like a whole bunch of them go down Alston Way. So I go down there to see, okay, what's going on? They're following someone or something. So I went down there, and I'm filming, and then suddenly I hear someone go, you know, there's that racist blank blank that's doxing you and ruining your lives. And I started to turn. I thought, okay, I got to get out of here. I'm surrounded by Antifa. And I took maybe one step, and the first like club smash knocked my camera and monopod out of my hand. And I thought, I'm just going to grab it and run. So I started to reach, and then they just started pounding me over the head. And
so you didn't say anything to them?
No. I'm always like a silent observer. For like 7 months, I go around, I observe, I record, and I just couldn't believe it. I was just shocked, and after the first few hits, I was stunned and dropped to the ground.
Well, there's this amazing moment. I don't know if our viewers watched it, but there's an African-American guy standing there in a red shirt. He's a lefty journalist, actually, named Al Letson. Mm-hmm. And he said later he thought you were going to get killed, and he dove on you and put his hands up, and people stopped hitting. Have you talked to him?
You know, I reached out to him on Twitter, and I definitely want to connect with him. I didn't know at the time that he had stopped it. I have very little recollection of what happened. I was sure I was going to die. I kind of made my peace.
Yeah.
And like, I hope it's quick because this is really painful.
He was sure you were going to die too.
Yeah, and I couldn't believe it when they let me up, and I thought they were standing me up to finish the job or something to really get at me. And it's unbelievable that that man who doesn't know me and probably thought that I could be maybe an enemy. I mean, I don't know. People assume I'm all right, which is completely crazy, but he dove in rather than standing back and doing the journalistic thing. I mean, he saved my life.
Well, God bless him.
Incredible.
God bless him for doing that. Really quickly, you said you spent 7 months following Antifa around. Who are these people exactly, and what do they want, to the extent you can tell?
They think they're the anti-fascists, and so then everyone else that they don't like or they disagree with is a fascist. And Trump supporters are all, they used to be Trump supporters are, white nationalists or alt-right. Now it's like graduated to anyone who supports Trump is a Nazi or a neo-Nazi, regardless of your skin color. And they believe that we've committed the first crime. We've committed the first crime by being a Nazi, so it's self-defense. And they don't believe it's even a crime to attack us, even unarmed. And that's what's been happening.
Doesn't look like America to me. Keith, congratulations on surviving that. I hope you hook up with Al Letson, and thanks for doing the show.
Thank you very much, Tucker.
Laura Ingraham is a radio show host, the editor-in-chief of LifeSet.com. She's been thinking a lot about this subject, and she joins us tonight. You had, I thought, one of the smartest suggestions. Why not classify Antifa as a terrorist group?
Well, they are. I mean, sadly, that is America today. We've had official after official ignore this. This has been going on for a long time with Antifa.
Yes.
They've been Antifa. They've been terrorizing people, intimidating people, and when they can get away with it, violently attacking people. These are felons, and for them, this is. We hear about honor killings, usually in the Middle East. For them, this is honorable. And I'm concerned we'll get to that point where to win the badge of honor in Antifa, you do actually have to kill someone. We saw what happened with that young woman in Charlottesville, and she was run over by I guess a white supremacist. That death was horrific and reprehensible, and should be condemned by all.
Yeah.
This should be condemned with alacrity by all Republicans, Democrats.
Right.
Everyone, and I'm glad Nancy Pelosi, finally came out. She had to be shamed into it. I think if this network and a number of people on this network and a few others hadn't written about it, talked about it, reported on it, I'm not sure she really would have.
Of course, you wouldn't know what happened.
No.
Actually, one of the reasons I'm really hoping that someday my prayers are answered and the Republicans take over Congress is maybe they'll have hearings on this.
Yeah.
Because I think there very little we know really about Antifa.
And who's I mean, maybe they don't need a lot of money, but don't you get the sense that there's some individual or individuals who are centrally organizing this? They have.
Well, yeah, where's the Congress in that? I mean,
Yeah.
This is happening. This is not
yeah.
Venezuela. This
Right.
is happening in California.
You
What's
would never
going
know.
on?
Like if you said this was happening in Venezuela, there was a riot. You would say, oh yeah, that looks like Venezuela. But no, this is the United States. This is where the free speech movement began.
Yes.
In the United States, we have police who are not doing their job. They're ostensibly are standing there with shields and helmets on. They're allowing Antifa to enter this park. They stood back and left when Antifa entered this space after the initial protest was canceled and so forth. They said they worried that if they blocked Antifa, it would lead to real violence. Okay, well, something's not working out here. And there will be an individual who decides to bust through the qualified immunity that most police get for how they conduct themselves in the line of duty, and really go after these police departments.
Oh yeah.
And I think you could look for a conspiracy. You could look for RICO. You could bust through qualified immunity, which oftentimes they get, because there's a recklessness beyond negligence. There is a reckless disregard for human life in the way this is being policed and covered. And we have civil rights lawsuits. Harmeet Dillon is representing
we talked to her.
Phenomenal, representing the Google engineer, but also representing an individual who was attacked during the campaign
in San
Jose, and there was violence there. But this is terroristic. This is fascistic, and this is shutting down speech and intimidating good people, prayerful people who were there to pray for peace for all sides.
Keith Campbell, who we just talked to, who has a bruised kidney because of this, and almost got killed, I think it's fair to say.
Somebody's going to get killed.
He said the criterion they're using to choose the people they beat up is voting for Trump.
Yeah.
So how is this different from a political militia abetted by the police that you see in Caracas or Port-au-Prince? That's what it looks like to me.
Remember what they did with that border militia? What were they called? They would ride the border, and the media went crazy. The Minutemen went crazy over the Minutemen. How could the Minutemen be there? Like, they're taking the law into their own hands. Well, these individuals are policing thought and violently doing so.
Punishing people for voting for someone they don't like.
And I think the Democrats definitely have some culpability here because they have ratcheted up the criticism of both the president and the president's supporters in ways that are very disturbing. Going right to race, right to racism. The race play that they've made is so toxic and so bad for African Americans, Hispanics, white people, poor people. It's certainly not good for anyone. And they've countenanced this. Now, they can come back with their condemnations now, but people are whipped up into this frenzy that Donald Trump hates all minorities. He thinks this. He's anti-immigrant. He's this. We've got to stop him at all costs. He's the real clear and present danger to the country. When you listen to Schumer, listen to Pelosi, that's what they're paying him out to be.
Well, the establishment on both sides have done a terrible job running this country. They've failed by every
Have the
measure.
Bushes come out and condemned Antifa?
No,
have all these people trashing Trump? Have they come out to condemn Antifa?
Oh, you're whipping me up into a frenzy, Laura.
Yeah! Good to be here.
Speaking of a frenzy. Thanks for coming on.
No problem. Great to see you.
Rescue efforts are ongoing in Houston. The elderly and other vulnerable groups remain endangered by floodwaters. As we said, a nursing home was just evacuated for the first time since the storm. We've got more updates from Trace Gallagher next. Plus, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, indicted IT aide, was deemed a threat to American national security, and yet apparently he still has a secret email address giving him access to the House of Representatives computer network. He did as of yesterday. An unbelievable story. Mark Stein joins us with the latest on that. A Fox News alert for you. Floodwaters starting to recede finally after days in Houston. But thousands of Texans still need rescuing. Today's many residents of a flooded nursing home were finally brought to safety, while helicopter crews rescued other stranded families. For an update of the situation there, we are joined by Trace Gallagher, who has been on the scene since the beginning. Trace, what's it like?
Well, I'll tell you, Tucker, it is receding here in Houston, but boy, you go out to Beaumont and Port Arthur and the water is still rising out there. We just spent 4.5 hours on a Black Hawk helicopter, and we have been all over southeastern Texas, and the amount of flooding is absolutely stunning. There was a time between Houston and Beaumont, as you hear a Black Hawk fly over, that we had a 70-mile stretch where it was nothing but water. It looked like lake after lake after lake, and in those areas, we counted maybe 6 or 7 neighborhoods that weren't totally inundated, meaning that if you were from Port Arthur or Beaumont, you were either a victim or you knew somebody who was. We were also a part of a very compelling rescue. I want to show you part of that. Watch. But they dropped the basket down. They're clearly looking for somebody, and then as soon as that person gets in, they will hoist that person up. As a rule, the people who are taken up in the baskets are fairly immobile. And here it is. Here we go. This is the first rescue mission we've seen since we've been live with you, Shep. It's a child and her mom, right? Over and over again. Can you imagine being a child like this? It just breaks your heart. Yeah, and the brother and the father were brought up after that, and of course they had a dog, and they brought the dog up as well, safe and sound. You talk about context and perspective, Tucker. You know, when you hear about these numbers, 13,000, 15,000 rescued, they tend to be numbers after a while, but when you're there and you see the faces of these people, it is compelling to say the least, and it gives you an idea of what size the hearts are of these guys from U.S. Customs and Border Protection when they send their air and marine unit out there, and they do this day after day after day. It really is just astounding. They've got a lot of work ahead of them. But I want you to know, Tucker, that we saved a deer for you last night and a dog for you tonight. So we're working on the human and the animal populace for this show on a nightly basis. Tucker.
You've always been my favorite reporter, Trace, but now more than ever. Thank you. Mass devastation in Houston has brought with it a breakdown in law and order, not as bad as in some natural disasters, but pretty bad. There have been numerous reports of looting by storm survivors. Yesterday, ABC reporter Tom Lamas was honest enough to tweet this, quote, "We're witnessing looting right now at a large supermarket in the northeast part of Houston. Police have just discovered a body nearby." Just reporting what he saw. And for that, he was vilified, Lamas was, and accused of attacking hurricane survivors. Dan Bongino was a former NYPD officer, and he joins us now. Dan, this is just a fact of life in situations like this. I've seen it firsthand a lot during Katrina. We saw cops looting Walmart on camera during Katrina. I saw myself people looting liquor stores and shoe stores. That's not the same as starving people feeding themselves. What about our society has changed so much that noting that you're watching it is somehow a thought crime?
Well, we've had complete culture rot, and I noticed, Tucker, because I saw a lot of the mob attack Tom Lamas on Twitter, that it was largely coming from, liberals who seem to feel like they're entitled to the property of other people. Listen, no one's trying to diminish at all the epic human tragedy we're watching unfold right now in Texas. But this kind of reminds me of the old Havelock Ellis quote, that civilization is a thin crust on a volcano. And Tucker, that thin crust is composed of law and order. When order breaks down, we have absolutely nothing. We cannot ever condone looting and the taking of other people's property, because then at what point, where does it end? I mean, relief agencies and government are doing their best to get people fed and get people housed, but we can't condone looting. This is just complete breakdown.
Right. Well, only like a decadent rich kid in Brooklyn would say something like that. And in fact, most people who did, I checked, are decadent rich kids in Brooklyn, of course. But you think about the people who are hurt by this. There were interviews today, for example, with the owner of the Bronze Bar in Houston, and it was being looted. Said, "My business that I've worked for was looted last night. I can't believe people are capable of that." Samir Abraham, who has got a store there too, watched it being looted on surveillance cameras. "These people are taking advantage of the weather and have been robbing us blind since last night. We tried to get there but couldn't reach it due to floods." It's not big corporations who suffer. It's like ordinary, normal working people who suffer as, the crowd cheers them on Twitter. I mean, who pushes back against this? Does anybody have the courage to say, you're not allowed to steal or hurt other people just because there was a storm?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. What kind of certifiable savage man beast do you need to be to walk into a small business? And there are videos of this on Twitter, sadly. I wish you can't unsee it, of people looting cash registers. What's your excuse for that? I don't understand. These are small businesses. These aren't the decadent Thurston Howell types. These are people who work their whole lives to keep their heads, and then they're out of the red ink. Keep their heads above water. No pun intended there. But to stay alive, and you're stealing their money and their livelihood because you have some sense of entitlement during a tragedy. I mean, that's really kind of deranged when you boil that down to the
But it's so consistent. But it's the left is always cheering on the destruction of ordinary people's stuff and their families, and making fun of normal people with jobs and, oh, your stupid patriarchy. You know what I mean? What is it about the American left that always wants to destroy normal life? I don't understand it. Why do they cheer on perversity always?
Well, Tucker, I mean, liberalism is built around nihilism. They're married. They've been joined at the hip, forever. The party of JFK, the Democrat Party of JFK, is dead. It's been taken over and hijacked by a far left that has no adherence to any objective values. They destroy anything that's objectively good. The family, big R rights given by God. So what do? They have to destroy. And the only thing they can do is make their base angry and make you believe that other people took that stuff from you. Therefore, you're entitled to it. Go get it. It's yours. Look what happened. I mean, you've seen this ideology through critical theory permeate the far left for decades now. And sadly, in moments of tragedy, you can see with the social media mob, it all comes out in its just horror.
They should go cover a riot or a hurricane or a war and see what happens when authority evaporates and disappears, when the cops leave. I bet they wouldn't be cheering it on then. Dan, thanks for joining us tonight.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
A group of Ivy League professors have written a letter, a really smart one, to their students. It's got a novel idea inside it. Think for yourselves. Up next, we'll talk to Princeton professor Robbie George, who signed that letter, about why such an obvious message is now so rare and wise on campus. Stay tuned. A Fox News alert for you. Today's record rainfall and devastating floods from Hurricane Harvey hit Beaumont, Texas. Helicopter rescue teams pulled families to safety, even rescued their endangered dogs as well, thank God. More than 20 people now confirmed dead in the aftermath of that storm. We'll keep you updated on new developments. Well, in news of campus lunacy, a collection of 15 professors at Harvard, Yale, and Princeton universities have written a letter condemning, quote, the vice of conformism. Listen to this. It's really interesting and smart. And telling their students to stand up to the real bigots on campus, the people who want to police everybody else's opinions. Think for yourself, the letter says. That means taking the trouble to learn and honestly consider the strongest arguments to be advanced on both or all sides of questions, including arguments for positions that others revile and want to stigmatize. Robert George is a Princeton professor. He signed the letter. He joins us tonight. Professor, thanks all for coming on.
Wonderful to be on your show, Tucker. Thank you for inviting me.
I was thrilled to invite you. There's something so wonderfully subversive about how reasonable this letter is, that it's hard to imagine how anybody could disagree with a single word of it without humiliating himself. Has anyone raised any complaints about it?
Well, if you go on social media, you will find some people complaining about it, but they are the people that you would expect to complain about it, the people who are perfectly content to have young people fall into groupthink and into conformity, and to just sign on with the dominant orthodoxy in the intellectual world, on campuses, in journalism, and so forth. But this is, of course, exactly what we're standing up against. We're telling our students not to fall into that groupthink and conformism. Think for yourself. You should be pursuing the truth. That's what being in college is all about. It's learning to pursue the truth, and it's learning to become a lifelong truth seeker. And you can't do that if you're just going to conform, fall in line with whatever the orthodoxy happens to be on campus. Whether, Tucker, it's of the right or of the left. It happens to be of the left right now. But the same thing would apply if it happened to be on the right.
Well, that's right. And there's nothing political about your letter. Let me just state that emphatically. I mean, you could have written this or signed it as a communist, as a flat earther, as a John Bircher. It doesn't matter. You're arguing for open-mindedness.
If you look at our signatories, it's a group of professors, 15, it's now actually 16 of us, from Harvard, Yale, and Princeton, but we represent a spectrum of views about politics, morality, religion. We're not all conservatives. I happen to be a conservative, but there are liberals who have signed as well, because they share with me this fundamental commitment to education as being truth-seeking, and to the conviction that you cannot seek the truth if you're a conformist, if you're an ideologue, if you're a dogmatist. You need an open mind and a willingness to consider the very best arguments to be made on competing sides of questions, and then make up your mind for yourself based on the weight of evidence and reason.
Exactly. The left is like the medieval church punishing heretics. So you have this wonderful line in here that I think I want to put on my refrigerator. The only people who need fear open-minded inquiry and robust debate are the actual bigots, including those on campuses or in the broader society, who seek to project the hegemony of their opinions by claiming that to question those opinions is itself bigotry. If we could just have every college student memorize those two sentences, I think it would be a better country.
Epithets like bigotry far too often are used to shut down debate. It's the equivalent of saying this conversation is over because the Bible says. Well, you can't continue to have a conversation if someone's going to use a conversation stopper. And just as we would accuse someone who tried to shut down conversation just by saying the Bible says of being a fundamentalist, all too often we have secular fundamentalists today, people who, because of their beliefs about same-sex marriage or abortion or whatever the topic, immigration, it doesn't matter, because of their beliefs, they want to shut down debate and discussion by calling the other guys names, calling their debating partners names. Well, that's just out of bounds, and we're trying to tell our students, don't fall for it. Don't put up with it. Certainly don't practice it, but don't allow yourselves to be intimidated and bullied by those who do practice it. They are the real bigots.
And it makes people so mediocre. I mean, I live in a world where I deal with it every single day, unfortunately. So, last question. You've got 16 signatories to this letter. Why not 1,600?
Well, we didn't seek 1,600. We wanted to get the letter out before classes begin. And, of course, students are descending on universities right now. We especially wanted to reach new students, recent high school students who are now on their way to college. So I didn't want to try to circulate this letter very, very widely. That takes a lot of time and effort, and people want to amend it and change this and change that. So I reached out to colleagues at the institutions I know best, people I know share this conviction, asked them to sign, and almost everyone I asked to sign did sign. And I'm so grateful to them. They're wonderful people, brilliant scholars, and deeply committed to truth-seeking.
Amen. Well, you're making me feel better. The fact that you're at Princeton makes me like the school. Professor Robbie George joining us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tucker.
Well, there are some remarkable new developments in the case of Debbie Wasserman Schultz and her indicted former aide. A lot of details you didn't read in the New York Times this morning, but that are real. Mark Stein joins us in just a minute to discuss that new report coming up. Every new development from Houston, Texas, still wet, still... Well, this saga of Debbie Wasserman Schultz and her IT aide, Imran Awan, grows more complex and sorted by the day. Wasserman Schultz of Florida continued to employ Awan, he's a Pakistani national, for several months, even after he was banned from the House computer network as a security risk. She refused to fire him until he was actually arrested at the airport trying to flee the country to go back to Pakistan, and then was indicted on several federal charges. Weirdly enough, though, the plot gets even stranger from there. A new report by Luke Rosiak of the Daily Caller News Foundation reveals that Awan actually had a second account with access to the House network. That account was still active as of yesterday, potentially providing Awan secret access to the House network, the very same network, as we just said, he was banned from as a security risk. The secondary email is linked to another House staffer who specializes in intel issues and works for House Intelligence Committee member Andre Carlson. Whoa. Mark Stein is an author and a columnist, and despite being Canadian, seems to care a lot more about America's security than some members of the House of Representatives, weirdly. He joins us tonight. Mark, I'm running out of kind of non-sinister explanations for this story.
Yeah, because basically everything people, as I said on your show a couple of months back, basically everything people have been looking for in the so-called Russia investigation is actually here in the more or less uncovered Imran Awan investigation. This guy had his access to House email withdrawn because he was a security risk, yet he still had a House email. And the House email he had, which is something like 123 at house.gov, suggests that in fact he was rather deeply embedded inside the House email system. There's nothing. By the way, just to talk first principles here, Tucker, I don't actually see why a lot of low-grade congressmen actually require so-called IT aides.
I agree.
And the fact that they have them is a potential security risk. So in a sane world, they wouldn't have IT aides. But if they do, the idea that they subcontract them to one Pakistani family, who are taking home extraordinary salaries that bear no relation to what low-grade IT aides can command, and wind up owning 4 homes in the Washington area, and the official explanation for that is that he had at least 2 wives to support, being a devout Muslim. This story is malodorous to a degree that nothing surrounding Trump's involvement in the Miss Universe pageant in St. Petersburg or wherever it was is at all. And nobody's interested in it.
Well, they're not interested because, as Debbie Wasserman Schultz herself explained, she was protecting this guy from racism, from the white supremacy of America.
Right.
That's why she refused to fire him.
Yeah, he's basically, as his lawyer said, he's being accused of browsing while Muslim, or whatever the
he's a civil rights martyr
was. Yeah, he is a civil rights martyr. He's actually he fled. The wife fled 6 months ago, so that in itself is problematic. There is a high level. She has already attempted to intimidate and obstruct the investigation investigation. As you know, she demanded the return of her laptop from the policeman investigating this, which is exactly, it's on camera, and it's the interference with a police investigation that everyone's accusing Trump of doing with James Comey and all those guys. So everything they're actually been sniffing around in Trump for with the Russian investigation for basically since last summer now, and they haven't come up with, is staring them in the face on this thing.
Man, if we ever get a Republican-controlled Congress, maybe they'll investigate it. That would be great.
Oh, yeah.
We'll hold out for that.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about
Special
Hillary.
investigator.
Don't hold your breath. So Hillary Clinton is back on the campaign trail. She's not trying to get votes this time. Instead, she's trying to sell her new book. It's called What Happened. She'll be hitting no fewer than 15 cities on her tour, and you can see her as long as you pay. This is the amazing thing. In New York City, tickets are $125 a piece. That's about as much as a Broadway show. In Toronto, for $2,400, you can meet Hillary Clinton. So you've sold a lot of books. You've been on the road on book tour. Have you ever heard of a book tour where the author charges to have people come for the privilege of buying the book?
Well, you did compare it with a Broadway show, $125, and you do get a restricted view of a full chorus of Macedonian content farmers dancing behind her, explaining why she lost the election. By the way, the $2,400, as I understand it, for a personal meet and greet, there are Saudi princes and Sudanese warlords saying, what the heck, that's bargain basement prices for a meet and greet with Hillary Clinton. I had to pay $4 million to the Clinton Foundation and sit through a speech on diarrhea in Africa from Chelsea before I could get a meet and greet with Hillary Clinton. So that Toronto deal is a hell of a steal. You know, that $2,400 for a mere meet and greet, and she will, and she promises to connect with you. So she's been practicing that glassy-eyed stare and the I speak your weight machine voice, and she's promised to be, the press release has announced, so it's official, that she's going to be surprisingly funny. I mean, I found election night surprisingly funny, so that did it for me, really, with the Hillary surprisingly funny routine. But it's been pre-announced that at this Toronto engagement, she's going to be surprisingly funny. So if you go, don't be surprised, because it's guaranteed. $2,400, it's surprisingly funny. For $3,600, she'll be predictably funny.
I'm actually going to watch this segment again on tape because I was so amused by it. Thank you, Mark Stein. It's great to see you.
Always a pleasure, Tucker.
Thank you. Well, mathematics may have built cathedrals and put a man on the moon, but we have bad news for you. Math is racist. Up next, we'll talk to the president of an organization who says math must be totally overhauled in order to, of course, promote social justice. Stay tuned. The Houston floodwaters may be receding, but many people remain at risk, and thousands still need to be rescued. Emergency workers and volunteers are still evacuating people from endangered buildings across that region. More than 20 people are confirmed dead as of right now, and officials are already investigating 17 additional deaths that may be related to the storm. We'll keep monitoring the situation. Well, it's hard to imagine a subject more universal than mathematics. Math is abstract, it's logical, it's the same no matter where you go in the world. You don't need to know any English to learn math. But while math is logical, people don't have to be. Now a group of academics is claiming that math is racist somehow. A new statement by the National Council of Supervisors of Mathematics calls social justice, quote, a key priority in math education, and condemns, quote, the current unjust system of mathematics education, excuse me, which it says is defined by privilege and oppression. Connie Schrock is the president of the National Council of Supervisors of Mathematics, and she joins us tonight. Connie, I didn't think there was...
Tucker. Thank you.
Hey, I didn't think that math, being universal and logical, could be affected by racism. How does this work?
Well, in our position paper, I'm not sure that we ever used that word racism, and we're really not talking about mathematics. I don't disagree with what you just said as far as what math is. What we want to do is improve mathematics education for all students in our country. The bottom line of our mathematics leadership organization is about better learning for all students.
Right. Well, of course, I'm for that. I just wonder, though, if you're moving us closer to that. So this is from your website, and I can't find my glasses, so I'm going to try to read this. It says, a social justice approach to mathematics education means to imbue mathematical experiences with opportunities to learn multiple histories of mathematics, analyze issues of fairness, and promote civic responsibility in their own communities and beyond. Now, if you said to me, I'm going to teach your kids that instead of learning algebra, I would say, first, stop patronizing me and my children, and second, go ahead and just teach them math, okay? Because nothing in that paragraph is going to help them get ahead in life. I would feel like you were shortchanging my kids if you proposed that to them.
We don't want to shortchange kids, but we've got to be able to teach them situations where they can use their mathematics so they can transfer the knowledge they learn in a sterile environment so that people stop saying, I hate math. We want to change that perception. We want it to be the ticket to their future, not something that provides a barrier to their learning. So when you translate all that, the bottom line is we want them to be able to use mathematics to improve their lives and their future. But I'm still planning to teach them mathematics, and they still have to know facts. We just don't want them to teach and learn facts in isolation and not understand where to put it and what it's going to do for them and the use they would have for it.
So a lot of poor school districts have terrible math scores. So I think Detroit 8th graders, something like 7% are passing proficient in math. It's not a money problem. I mean, kids in Detroit, I think Detroit spends something like 13 grand per child, which is more than Fairfax County, Virginia, one of the best school districts in the country. What do you think's gone wrong there? And this is a sincere question. I don't know the answer to it, but I would think this is the kind of thing you're thinking about. Why do you think that is? It's such a sad number, a terrible number.
It is a terrible number, and you know, education is important, but it doesn't take away all the other barriers these children face before they come to school.
Right.
We can't take care of those things that happened to them before they got to school. And what we're trying to do is provide mathematics education leaders with information. We want to share with the leaders that come to our seminars, our webinars, our conferences, what has happened in other places similar to them that's been successful. We're not going to tell somebody that there's one way to do mathematics, but what we want to do is provide them the opportunity to learn so that they can enable their students. I don't know what's causing that situation, but I work with a group of people in our organization that are looking at the research ideas in order to try and find the solution to these problems.
Yeah, I mean,
they're complex.
They're very complex. I agree with that completely. And it's not just about money, obviously. I mean, you seem to acknowledge that. But when you say there's not just one way to do mathematics, I mean, I thought the whole point was there is just one way to do mathematics. I mean, 2 + 2 = 4. And I wonder, like, when you say we need to teach the different histories of mathematics, who cares? Do you know what I mean? Like, does that actually help kids with the numbers?
Well, you know, I didn't write this paper. I support this paper, and it was adopted before I became president. I teach history and math, and today I was with students, and they were sharing stories of mathematicians through history's lives, and all of them fought against different barriers to be successful, and I think that helps students. But the other thing they're talking about is learning different ways. For instance, when I learned to multiply, probably when you learned to multiply, there was one way to multiply 2-digit numbers, and we followed that pattern exactly, and it had lots of steps. But we know there are other algorithms that work. That original, historically, was determined to be the best way to teach math because we couldn't afford paper at the time. So that used less paper to work.
Okay, I get it. And by the way, I'm interested in the history of math, just not in math. Do you know what I mean? That's a history course, not a math course. But really quickly, I mean, is someone going to measure the outcomes here to see whether math scores go up, or when they don't go up, are we just going to blame the test, as we often do? There's something wrong with the test. It's, you know, culturally biased or whatever. Are we going to make excuses for bad scores, or is someone going to be held accountable for these ideas?
I think we're not going to make excuses for bad scores. In fact, we can look at the changes that we have made. There are schools that are detracking, and we find that students, even the top end, the accelerated students, are performing better in high school when they come out of those tracking situations. We look at the data. We have a lot of members that are researchers, and we use research-informed strategies.
Okay. It does feel like politics is entering math, and, you know, like maybe that would be the last place politics should be, since it's inherently non-political. It doesn't have to do with opinions. It has to do with facts.
I agree. Right? I agree with you. We are not advocating for politics and mathematics. What we're
just when you said social justice had a role
children.
in it, that's okay. Connie, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks. Well, if you look at the numbers in the newspaper, the American economy seems pretty great. A lot of people don't feel like it is pretty great. In fact, a lot of people are worried about the state of the U.S. economy. Why is that? After the break, we'll show you a disturbing statistic that might provide a hint about what's actually going on in this country.